everybody. Thanks for joining us again. This is our sixth session of 8 challenges we typically see in asset management. During today's session, we will be discussing when the plan doesn't adequately address the funding needed for the capital improvements. Joining us today to engage in this conversation is Megan Powell and Mark Stevens from WithersRavenel. They were actually guests of webinar number 5. So if you'd like to hear some of their background, please review that webinar, and you can see they are really well qualified. So I'm so excited that they're here today, and some of their insight is going to be really great for us to hear. Very timely, very passionate information that can help us. So thank you both for joining me today. This is one of the best subjects I think we talked about in the series, in that there's so much to cover. I believe this is a topic that local government faces all year round with the budget. An example is when you're paving 2 miles of streets a year and you have 175 miles of streets, it takes you, really projection wise, you're looking at about 90 years to catch up. And that's not even counting new streets. So you have that feeling that you're just never going to catch up. So Mark, want to lean on you a little bit to talk about some of the repercussions of not planning ahead.
Sure, and thanks for the time again, Ty, and really enjoy being here. There's lots of repercussions of not planning ahead and not having a visionary thought process of how to maintain and how to operate your assets and plan for capital improvements. Oftentimes your small problems turn into very big problems, whether it's sewer, water, roadways, or the combination of all of those, stormwater, any of those can kind of play in there. And in the end, what you're doing, if you're not planning ahead and having forethought, is you're wasting a taxpayer dollar, and you're not being financially prudent with the funds that you've been given. Whether they're many or whether they're few, you've got to spend them wisely in the municipal and county governments. Oftentimes people get bogged down into the reactive, because they're stuck in this quagmire of not enough funding and all of these capital projects that's got to get completed. So most of the time they get stuck in a very reactive state automatically because of that, because they can't keep up with the capital improvement needs and the infrastructure maintenance and operations necessary to continue to maintain an asset at an adequate level. And we're taking these worst possible condition assets and trying to put a band-aid on them, or strap some wire around them with a patch and things like that, just to make them last a couple more years and kick the can down the road financially. But sometimes the most expensive repair is probably the appropriate decision that needs to be made at that time. And because in the future it becomes more of a premium cost, and that premium cost becomes something that exacerbates over time, because as your degradation curve continues to go down in the life cycle of your asset, obviously the more expensive the cost becomes. One of the best degradation curves that you'll see is on pavement ratings and PCS ratings, and how your streets degrade over the years. And you can rejuvenate, you can patch, you can do certain different asphalt repairs processes to maintain that asset while it's on that degradation curve. But once you get past a certain point, you're dealing with nothing but a full depth reclamation and repave. So at that point, it's a very expensive project, when you could have spent some money on it very early on, that would have been more of a prudent financial decision at that time. But again, we're all stuck with these very tough financial decisions. One of the major key points too of planning ahead is understanding what all your needs are. If you don't understand what the full comprehensive plan, the full comprehensive vision of your organization is, and what all those assets are, what the your financial needs, your capital needs, your maintenance and operation budgets, and everything else, those are all very critical as to the overall picture of understanding what your needs are. how much money you need to maintain the system. And that becomes a difficult discussion when it comes budget season every time. You've got to sit down, you've got to talk to a finance director or a city manager or a team of folks who are making decisions as to how much funding you're going to get. And then ultimately, what's the appetite of your board that you're working for in making decisions moving forward regarding rates and tax dollars or whatever, and is there increases associated with that. Being able to tell that story based on a comprehensive land use plan is critical, because if you're not, then you're being reactive, and then ultimately it's very difficult to sell and tell that message of, hey, this is not a very good position to be in, because you're not preparing yourself to be able to say what that position is for the future. So you've got to have that understanding of this full vision of the future and this comprehensive plan in order to do that.
Yeah, so proactive versus reactive, right? So great point, Mark. And also CIPs often include more for new construction and expansion than for maintenance and rehab. So why should existing infrastructure be looked at closer?
Oftentimes CIPs, and they come in as a wish list. They rather than an actual action plan. CIPs get adopted, but they're never. Sometimes it's difficult to get the funding committed to it. You're competing against other departments, and I'll go back to a former government that I worked for, and I'll tell you that my street superintendent, he would have things that wouldn't get approved, and that just kicked the can down to the next year, and he added it to the list of requests for the next year, plus all the other stuff that was on his 5-year plan for that particular year, and then it just kept stacking and stacking and stacking. And he was fortunate that he was in a point in his career where he didn't really care. He's just going to put everything on there. But when CIPs are put together, you're looking at all kinds of different things. What's the funding available? How does that relate to your maintenance operation budget? Where are your work orders? Where's a lot of your issues? Where are your external funding sources, grants, loans? Are you looking at some of these ARPA funds? Lots of different avenues for that. So funding gets very important. And when you're talking about maintenance and rehab, that's your annual. Just a lot of times they get down to where this is just something to put a patch on it to kick the can down the road. Like I said previously in the previous question. It's an opportunity where you can take some of these worst cases and try to buy a little bit of time. If you're being a very proactive utility, though, you're using maintenance and operation budgets to do these improvements annually, so that it improves that degradation curve versus just putting a patch on something. So what ultimately you want to try to work to is, once you get these CIPs approved and you do these improvements in your plan, is build in a maintenance budget that annually is going to continue to keep that asset maintained moving forward. And that's a key in maintenance operations budgets. And it's easier to state that fact when you get into your budget season, to say, well, you guys, remember, you approved this project. I want to make sure that moving forward we have what we need to maintain this project moving forward. And you might want to give a little bump into your maintenance budget. But in the end, all things come down to what's the available funds. And if it's not coming from grants, it's coming out of the pocket of the local government. And that's a tough position to be in, and board members have to make that decision, and ultimately managers have to recommend it.
Yeah, so that's a great transition to Megan, who is a funding and finance guru. So appreciate you being here, Megan. Can you talk a little bit? People have been saying the word unprecedented, and throwing out around these words that the funding coming down right now, we probably won't see again. So can you talk a little bit about the funding currently coming to local governments during this time?
Yeah, thanks, Ty. Like you said, it's unprecedented funding that's coming down right now for local governments. The other day, I heard somebody say something about we'll probably never see this type of funding come down in our lifetimes again. Right now, with we previously had CARES Act, which really didn't focus on infrastructure, but with the ARP funding, Build Back Better, and then just heavy growth in North Carolina companies with that tax revenue. It's really kind of a golden time in terms of things that we can do for life cycle funding, rehab and replacements, and then again, that new infrastructure. Right now, there's about $1.2 trillion in infrastructure investment for the Jobs Act, and 1.1 billion of that is coming to North Carolina alone for water, wastewater, and stormwater, and then $7.2 billion for road and highway projects. The state funding coming down is, excuse me, significantly higher than it has been in the past years. And just in the North Carolina state budget this year, there is $1.7 billion available in ARP funds. I mean, that's just historic funding that's just been coming down to everybody. The next couple of years, when we have to spend these funds, is going to allow us to get a lot of things done that people have been having on those CIPs that they haven't had funding for in the past to get done.
So great point about doing things that they couldn't get done. So talk about the importance of looking at the overall financial picture for these communities in addition to the overall asset structure picture.
So it's really important, like Mark was talking about earlier, to take a strategic look on these things. Make sure you're spending the right funds for the right project. You don't want to spend your ARP funds on something that could have been paid for with a grant or a loan, CDBG or SRF funding. Looking at it strategically so you can get the most bang for your buck and potentially combine multiple sources. So you can see a full, seeing that full picture of what you're doing to be able to combine those funds is really going to help you in getting these projects funding. A lot of these projects, you have to have specific goals, objectives, and measurable things that the funding sources are asking for. So you need to make sure that your goals are specific, actionable, and can be done over the multi-year time period of these projects. You want to align financial plans with operational plans to make sure you can get where you need to go. Thinking about it from an internal standpoint as a manager, how much easier it is to know and understand what you have to do to get to this goal. Schedule the work that needs to be done and really help you get there. You want to spend your money smart. We talked about that a minute ago, talking about combining the right sources of funding together to get the most bang for your buck. And that's where these CIPs really come in to help you, to be advantage to you. Having a 10-year plan, it really helps for the life of these projects, but it also really helps if you have any board instability. If you have an election coming up over the next year or two and you have new board members coming on, if you look at them and saying, hey, we have this 10-year plan, we've got funding sources identified or potential funding sources identified, really makes it a lot harder to change that direction if it doesn't need to be changed.
That's great. I think that's all we have for today. I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us and sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us. I will encourage everyone out there to join us for our next session, where we'll tackle the challenges of when the asset management plan fails to consider long-term financial aspects of new infrastructure investments. As always, for a replay of this session or a copy of the material we referenced, you can find links to all this on our website at www.WithersRavenel.com, or you can find it on our LinkedIn page or YouTube page. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at info@WithersRavenel.com, and we will get your question to the right person. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.